As promised, Martin George joins us on the Zoom line. It's always great to have that conversation with Martin, very much open, candid, able to break it down for us in a way we can understand. And I really need some guidance, some counsel this morning, Martin, because I'm by no stretch of the imagination a legal luminary. I said that in my opening this morning, but I live in Trinidad and Tobago just like everyone else. And, you know, we look at perception. I listen to people on the ground, and I think, again, you know, you'll break down to us as to why, you know, this case was dropped. But I'm thinking here that since the days of O'Halloran, and we look at what would have happened with Cold Heart and with Clico, with Mr. Dupree, and so many of the big names over the years, it seems to me that the perception is once you're on a level, you know, you're big, more or less you have the means and the clout and I guess the representation to find ways to maneuver the system. And it seems that the small man, without the particular clout and without that kind of weight, gets the end of the stick we know. We don't really want to talk about this morning. So I'm just trying to figure out, you know, work out the maths on this scenario. And again, just try to see if indeed the judicial, you know, I guess the perception and the system itself, if it's able to, I guess, bring any form of faith and give the citizens a sense of hope and belief in the SAD system. So just break down for me. We'll come back to the perception. This case being dropped, just work out the dynamics there for me.
Yeah, hi, good morning to you, Jason, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah, Jason, it is, I guess, we have to recognize that there are two sides to this story, in the sense that for those who are family, friends, relatives, supporters of Mr. Ramlogon and Mr. Ramdeen, they would say that the justice system has worked superbly in this instance. Those who may feel otherwise may think that, well, hey, listen, exactly what you said, you know, that, look, it appears that, you know, if you are rich and powerful, then, you know, the justice system goes one way, and if you are poor and indigent, it goes another. And that perception is going to be very hard to shake in this case because of the series of backroom dealings which appear to have occurred. So in this scenario, what I think still begs explanation for the public, and I think clearly the office of the DPP ought to at least bring some clarity, you know, to the nation. If it is that you had a scenario where 3 gentlemen were charged, you are talking about 3 very high-profile persons. There seems to be no way on God's green earth that any sitting DPP in his right mind could have taken such a decision unless you already had substantial, credible evidence that you felt was sufficient to establish more than a prima facie case. In other words, you know what the end game is in a criminal prosecution in terms of the burden of proof on the prosecution. It is proof beyond reasonable doubt. So you must have weighed up, measured, you know, examined, cross-examined in your own mind the evidence that you would have seen before you would have given directions for these 3 gentlemen to be charged. And I want us to go back to that, you know, and go back to the basics there to ask the questions from the start. In other words, did you originally have sufficient evidence to lay the charges? If you did, then John Public is quite entitled to ask the questions, why then were these series of deals and these backroom machinations engaged in? In other words, if you think of a normal, small individual who is charged before the courts, nobody is making any backroom deal and offering, amnesty or offering, any guarantees, or you're signing agreements, and that is not happening. You are hauled before the courts like a common criminal. You are grilled through the system. You are processed like a can of corned beef. When you finish, you come out like potted meat. If you understand me, by the time the judicial system is finished with you. But it appears, for whatever reason, there appeared to be this need or this desire to then engage with Mr. Vincent Nelson in this separate deal for him to turn state's evidence. The question is, why did you need that if you felt that you had sufficiently strong, cogent, and compelling evidence in the first place to charge the three gentlemen? You could not have charged all three in the hope that one would turn state's witness and then you now make a case against the remaining two. That could not be your game plan. That would be recklessness of the highest order by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Well, you mentioned British King's Counsel Vincent Nelson, who basically, well, he can't be extradited. He cannot. And he basically is saying that, he's not coming to testify. And I think based on that, and other factors, we are seeing the case fall flat. I mean, his role, just explain again to those looking on his particular role. And if indeed, well, I guess it worked, because the fact that he says, hey, I have nothing to say, right? And there's no particular extradition. I mean, basically, he's not compelled, right? They said the state, this is from the Guardian today, page 5, it says, quote, the state currently does not have the power to compel Mr. Nelson to give evidence in the matter. And this is based on the DPP suggesting this, and he says that Mr. Nelson cannot be extradited.
Yeah, but you see, this is the point. This is the point, because when you gave him these guarantees and these immunities, then you ought to have ensured that whatever deal you were making was an airtight and a watertight deal that would guarantee that you could get your end. Because basically, Vincent Nelson is laughing at all of Trinidad and Tobago. He has turned the nation into a laughing stock, but it's absolutely the fault of our own high officials who have bungled, fumbled, and absolutely messed this up from the get-go. Because as I said, and I want us not to lose sight of this point, Jason. In other words, if you felt you had enough evidence to charge, then why were you engaging in these machinations with Mr. Nelson in the first place?
Just break down.
Then there's another layer to the whole thing, because it appears that the then sitting Attorney General, I don't know what jurisdiction he had in terms of what would ultimately be a criminal prosecution or a criminal matter. It appeared he then now went into his own deal with Mr. Nelson, which the DPP publicly disavowed and indicated that he had no knowledge of it. He disavowed all knowledge of it. So therefore, you are talking about absolutely ludicrous scenarios where the right hand doesn't seem to know what the left hand is doing. And this is the state of Trinidad and Tobago. In other words, these are arms of the state. And it seems that each one is doing their own thing. And you end up in an absolute chaos and a situation that is so appallingly embarrassing, not just for the nation, but you also think of in terms of Mr. Ramlogon and Mr. Ramdeen, in the sense that they were charged, they were handcuffed. They were publicly portrayed as villains, as criminals, as, nefarious characters. That's the image that was put out there when they were charged. And by you having now to discontinue the matter, we're not talking about a situation where it went through the process and a magistrate or a judge ruled on it and, they were found not guilty or they were set free or discharged after having gone through the process. You, the very one who, would have given instructions to lay the charges, you are the one who comes to the court basically to give a mea culpa, to say, well, oh boy, my star witness has suddenly gone dumb and he's not speaking, so therefore I am withdrawing the case.
Well, let me ask you this, because again, I'm guided here by this morning's Guardian and the current AG. So clearly what you have said to me there gives me the impression that the former AG dropped the ball. There was almost a silo operation going on where DPP's office and the AG office, clearly something went awry at some point there. But the current AG, the new AG, he says he's stunned, but promises to pursue options for justice. What does that mean?
Maybe
is that talk? Is that just talk?
Maybe the less is that a possibility? About that, the better. Because, in other words, they're all now with egg on their faces. So I guess it's necessary to say something to try to bolster the sagging public confidence. But clearly, I don't think anyone is really impressed or convinced by those, fighting words that you see there. Because it has been, this is nothing short of an absolute fiasco. It is a fiasco. And you are talking about governmental involvement. And I mean, some may want to describe some aspects of the matter as interference in the process, which has resulted in this, debacle and this travesty of justice, in the sense that, and I mean, it's a travesty either way you look at it, because we have to be fair and we have to be balanced and look at it from both sides. It's a travesty from the perspective of Mr. Ramlogon and Mr. Ramdeen, as I said, because they would have been portrayed to the public as, in this very negative light as a result of these charges, and then now you're discontinuing them. It's a travesty of justice from the perspective of, I guess, the general population, who may feel, well, look, hey, you see, they were charged, and then, because they occupy certain positions in society, they've gotten away, and, this is all because of some cook-up that went on behind the scenes. So either way, the faith and confidence in the judicial system has once again been shattered. Just in June, remember, JW, just in June, the Privy Council made a very stunning ruling in the Piarco 1 corruption cases, where they quashed the indictment. This is after, so many years, after more than a decade of it, going through the courts. The Privy Council quashed that indictment. So, I mean, we really appear to be making a mockery of the justice system in Trinidad and Tobago. And it comes back to your opening remarks in terms of how would the man in the street feel upon viewing this? How would they think of our justice system? They would obviously feel, well, you see, it's only because persons occupy certain positions of power that they are able to get away with these things, and ordinary citizens clearly cannot
and let me tell you,
be afforded these luxuries.
And let me tell you, it's a trickle-down effect. Before we wrap things up, I'll just say this, because obviously Mr. Ramlogon, Mr. Ramdeen can breathe easy this morning, sip their tea and at least have that heaviness.
But I'm sure it's not tea they'd be sipping. It might be, a bubbly sort of expensive alcoholic drink.
Yeah, because once you get a case off your back, that's like a heaviness, that's like a spirit you get off.
Of course. Because as I said, when you think of the reputational damage that something like this could cause.
But when I think of the small level criminal, the bandits who will, and again, don't be, people don't get fooled, you know. It's not like they don't know what's going on. They might not know all the intimate details. But it sets a particular tone where if folks at the top, and again, you know, I'm not dealing with Mr. Ramlogon and Mr. Ramdeen exclusively here. We're just talking generally based on the track record. Big ones at the top never really are touched. The small man say to himself, well, hey, clearly, they could do it, we could do it too. We're just doing it on a different level.
No, and that's the thing. And you know,
we have about a minute. Go right ahead. I'll give you a closing remarks. We have just about a minute before we wrap up.
Even go back to, if you recall, the prosecution that was launched against the then sitting Chief Justice Sharma, and how that case collapsed. And that was, again, with a recalcitrant star witness who was the then Chief Magistrate, Sherman McNichols, you know, and at the last minute, he said he's not willing to give evidence, and the entire thing collapsed. You know, the Piarco Airport 1 case, which the Privy Council ruled on, that again pointed, you know, to certain actions of then Attorney General, Mr. John Jeremy, you know, and, you know, questions were raised as to, you know, certain arrangements that appeared to be taking place, you know, on the side.
Yeah.
And it's this level of, you know, activity that is always the cause for concern. And, you know, unfortunately, JW, the public feels, and probably with good reason, that these high office holders are never made to account. They are never held to account. Yeah. So therefore, the nonsense will continue, and it's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. The band plays on while the ship of state of Trinidad and Tobago sinks in the icy waters with no sign of any rescue coming at all our way.
Mr. George, I want to thank you this morning, at least bringing some clarity, some perspective on this matter. Let's monitor and see how things pan out, and we will touch base soon.
Have a great morning. Thank you.
Same to you. We come back and deal with the PNM internal elections. Political analyst Dr. Indira Rampasad joins me next. Internals, let's have that discussion.